preview at that point, and then we'll just kind of roll from there.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay. Am I interrupting your dinner? Oh, y'all don't eat dinner until like 8 or 9 o'clock, right?
It's true, but I am married to a very unconventional Spaniard. You'd think he was American because he's a 5 a.m. club. Like, I think he's self-proclaimed president of the 5 a.m. club. So we tend to eat on the earlier side, and he's in bed and like dead asleep.
My sister-in-law lived in Barcelona for a couple of years, and it was just like, it was just funny stories she would tell us. So.
Oh my gosh. When I first moved here, especially in the summers when it is like ridiculously hot, we'll roll up at 10 o'clock, you have drinks, then you go to the actual restaurant where you're going to eat, maybe sit down at 10:30, and then you go until like 2. And that's not like on a Friday. That can be a Wednesday.
That is
I don't understand. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. Seriously, we're going to do this.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
And Hiatt, it is awesome having you on the show. We've been talking now for probably 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Promising we're going to do this interview. So how are you doing?
I'm having a great time. It's good to be here, Scott.
Well, I hope it continues to be great. Because it was fun talking to you beforehand. So let's do this thing. Let's inspire, educate, and empower the people out there. Your new book, Bet on Yourself, is right there behind you.
It is. Product placement.
There. Well done. Well done. Give us the idea behind the book. So this is your first book.
Yes.
You have a ton of experience in this space. I want to hear, why did you write this book in the first, what sparked the idea? And then why were you like, I'm doing this?
So I was a bit of an unwilling author, I have to say, in the beginning. A lot of people have this as a bucket list item for their life. It was not on mine. But I started public speaking very unintentionally. I got invited by someone who saw my profile on LinkedIn, and I got on my first stage for the first time. And I told my story for the very first time in 2013 on this random stage in New York. From then, I started honing and realizing how unique my career has been, the people that I work for, what an amazing privilege it has been to have my personal business school be an apprentice to Jeff Bezos, Eric Schmidt, and Marissa Meyer. And so I started to have this appreciation for this incredible, irreplicable experience and knowledge that sat in my head. And then when I would speak, people would come up to me afterwards and say, oh my gosh, please tell me you're writing a book. And I just thought that was a nice thing that you say to speakers. It honestly did not occur to me for about 5 years that they were serious about that. But then, as fate would have it, I ended up meeting the person who is now my book agent at a 4th of July party. And I told him my story, and he emailed me the next day and was like, no, seriously, you have to write this. But really what convinced me to do it was that realizing that I had experienced a moment in time that will never happen again. I sat next to Jeff Bezos for 18 hours a day for 3 years as he invented not only e-commerce, but the gold standard of e-commerce. I saw the birth of the internet. I was at Google when they finally converted into becoming the dominant search engine they are today. And it's a really elite education that I think belongs into as many minds as possible. So this book is my attempt at translating all of these best practices of these super performers I've worked for the rest of us normal people, so that we can create lives and careers full of ambition and joy and centered around what is most valuable to us. So I use my career as a case study in the book. So there's some really fun stories in there from the foundation of the internet to pull you along. But I also, at the end of each chapter, created what I call ROI sprint challenges, where the reader can then translate some of these crazy stories that I share into challenges for themselves to hit their biggest goals and milestones in their life.
That is fascinating. So I have a question for you. Between Jeff, Eric, and Marissa, which one would win the arm wrestling championship between the three of them?
Definitely Jeff Bezos.
Really?
But no one has ever asked me that question before. So when I first started working with Jeff, he was like the nerd 1.0 version of Jeff. Like this, he was not wearing aviators and leather jackets. He was not jacked like he is now. He was just starting to kind of have this morning routine that involved like physical exercise when I first started working with him, because he realized for his mind to perform at the level it needed to every day, he had to take equally good care of his health. So he is in insanely good shape now. That promise to himself, he has definitely lived on. He would for sure win arm wrestling. However, I would not like, I don't know how it would bet between Marissa and Eric. They're also very strong-willed people. I think like the mental commitment to that arm wrestling contest would be probably more interesting than just the physical feat, honestly.
I could see that. And that's why I asked, because I'm not going to downplay just because Marissa's female, her
Oh
strength. I
no,
mean, she is a powerful woman.
very.
So in that experience, tell us a little bit of the things that you gathered, that the ideas you gathered from working with these individuals, that you digest for us and kind of lay out
Mhm.
for us in the book. Give us one of the big principles that you learned.
There's a couple common denominators. While each of them have very distinct personalities and management styles and communication styles that differentiate them, they do have some commonalities that I've seen not only in these CEOs that I've worked for, but also in the cast of characters that was around us. And the first one, honestly, I think surprises people the most, but it comes in the form of humility. Now, when you think of these people now, like Jeff, Eric, and Marissa, are so powerful among literally the wealthiest and most powerful people on the planet, humility might not be the first word that comes to mind. But I sat next to them and watched them build humility into their learning style, their leadership style, and the way they motivate their teams. So one great example that I highlight in the book is how Jeff, even way back in 2002, when I started working for him, he knew he was a pretty intimidating character. Not only is he supremely intelligent, but he knows exactly what he wants. And if you disappoint him, you're going to hear about it. But what he did was, knowing that he can be an intimidating force in a room, he built in some checks and balances around that so that he would never become complacent. There's something we, in Silicon Valley, we call the hippo effect. And the hippo effect is the highest individually paid person's opinion. And once the hippo has spoken, everyone else innovation stops, creativity stops. And so Jeff wanted to combat this hippo effect, and he created a role called the shadow. Now, the shadow has been in the news a little bit recently in October because the very first shadow, Andy Jassy, has just been named Jeff's successor as CEO of Amazon. But when Andy was this young executive 19 years ago and assumed this role of shadow, he had two jobs. One was to literally be at Jeff's side, reading every email in every meeting, on every flight, like literally his shadow, because that was the only way that he could have the full context that Jeff had. All the other SVPs had their individual deliverables and needed to be heads down and like inventing the future as fast as possible. But Andy's job was to be that counterbalance. And then once he had that context, the second part of his job, which was most important, came into play, which was to poke holes in all of Jeff's favorite ideas, to challenge him, help him see around blank corners, make sure that they were gathering all the right data and that they never got complacent. Jeff called that avoiding the dreaded day two. When you're a startup and you're on day one and you're fighting for your life and everyone's underbetting you, that's the enthusiasm, the energy, and the creativity he wanted to hold on to. When you're in day two, you get complacent and then you think all your jokes are funny and all your ideas are good. And so he created the role for the shadow to make sure that that never happened. I think that takes a lot of humility, and you have to be very brave to be the shadow, I have to say. But I watched that play out, and it really shaped the way that I interacted with him as well, because it gave me permission to challenge some things as the junior most person at the entire company.
And that is what we call psychological safety, right?
Yes.
Is that ability to bring challenge, to speak up, to say things without the fear of being bombarded, discredited, stomped on, blown apart, right? And
Absolutely.
and that is probably what I would assume, says helps contribute to the growth of Amazon, is the fact that that openness to innovate is a culture that is going to thrive.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Not only was that kind of thought leadership tolerated, it was demanded. The way he ran his meetings, he has those famous 6-page memos where you had to really present your argument like you were, arguing in front of the Supreme Court, or you were going in front of for peer review with academic peers, you really had to present all the data, the arguments, analyze all the premises upon which you were making those decisions, and everything was fully documented. Then that allows the executives in the meeting to spend 100% of that time debating. Those meetings were not weather reports. This isn't just like, here's how stuff's going. We have dashboards for that. But when you have a culture that is primed for debate and analysis and holds you to that account, that is exactly what you said. That plus that psychological safety is what makes like the magic happen. That's how they invented the future in the way that they did. I also want to preface everything I'm saying by saying, I don't want this to be interpreted as hero worship. I am very aware, as well as I know their incredible strengths, I'm very aware of their flaws as well. So I just want to add that asterisk in here, but there's so much that they got right.
Yeah.
Worth highlighting.
And I think that that's, we're a culture of drama, right? In some way, shape or form, right? We love the meaty stuff. And so we try to go there sometimes because it's entertaining. But we cannot discredit the brilliance and the things that were there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, talk about another Silicon Valley, Steve Jobs, right? And the things that he did, but there's a lot of things that, people are like,
he was a complex character.
Burned some bridges, right? So there was some interesting things happening there. And you're right. We all have those things, right? And I would like to, so let me ask you, so we talked a little bit about brand. We were talking about your brand a little bit before this call.
Yes.
3 words you would use to describe Jeff. Go.
Curious, ambitious, and I'm trying to remember. It's a very particular word that he used all the time that's flying out of my brain.
No. Think about your word for him.
No, the reason why I want it is my word is because when he created Amazon, he literally bought this word as a domain. Relentless is the word I would use. If you go to relentless.com, it redirects to amazon.com. That's a little Easter egg secret for you.
Really?
That is the perfect word to describe Jeff, because he's relentless in the pursuit. Like, he will go 100 questions deeper than any other normal human would into something that he doesn't know or he thinks is worthy of debate or exploration. That is, relentless is the perfect word for him, because it's the curiosity, it's the passion, it's the vision, it's the enthusiasm. Like, there's a reason why the average tenure of his SVPs is 19 years. 19 years in an environment that is that intense. Those, you have to be getting a lot in return for that. I think that's the greatest credit I can give him as a leader. Like, that right there is proof in the pudding. But he is relentless. He will go way farther than any normal person would.
Okay, fair enough. Sounds good. So let's do the same exercise with Marissa. Or 3 words you'd use to describe Marissa.
Marissa is data-driven, creative, and inspirational.
Okay.
She's a very interesting mix of 2 sides, seemingly disjointed talents combined in this beautiful single mind. I've never seen anyone else with that mix of skill sets.
Okay. So let's dive into that. So her influence and what she brought to the table and your experience in working with her. What's an aspect from the book that you emphasize that was something that you took away from your time with her?
I learned so much from her. So I started working for Marissa the first 3 years I was at Google. So this is 2006 through 2009. She, at the time, was vice president of search products and user experience, which is a very long, fancy title. It just meant we made really cool stuff. Other people had to figure out how to monetize it. We just made really cool stuff. We weren't yet the dominant search engine. Marissa was in charge of the homepage. She was in charge of maps, Gmail, calendar, all the stuff that is ingrained in our daily habits and lives right now. She invented it. She made all of that. The reason she was able to do that at such a pace, at such a critical moment for the company, was the way in which she hired her teams. So I would say the thing I learned most from her was the way that she empowered and got out of their way. In fact, at the time, a good friend of mine, when I joined Google, we were working easy 100-hour weeks, if not more. And a friend of mine is like, I am concerned about you. You are there all hours of the day and night. You go in every weekend. And she's like, I'm really worried you're going to burn out. And I was sincerely surprised. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm there not because anyone asked me to be. I don't want to miss it. I don't want to miss the moment when they figure out that bug. I don't want to miss it when they invent this next thing that's going to be the future of our lives. That's the enthusiasm that she hired, designed, and cultivated on that team. You just didn't want to miss it. You wanted to be part of it. And in the book, I tell a fun story about, she calls it finding your rhythm. So she had this engineer named Johanna, and Johanna was very important to Marissa. We could not lose her. She was very talented. She has expertise that were rare in the world. Literally, like there weren't people like her in the world with her expertise. And Johanna was in charge of our expansion into India. And she had 2 young children, a newborn baby and a very young child. And Marissa said, I can't lose you. I can't burn you out. What do we do here? And Johanna's like, don't take me off of India. Like, I love that I'm a mom, but I love that I can run something so strategically important to the growth of this company. Don't take me off. And so Marissa's like, what do we do? She said, you know what? I don't mind having conference calls every morning at 3 a.m., but I do mind missing dinner time and bath time with my kids. And Marissa's like, that's it. And she would protect that time tooth and nail, no matter what. Johanna was home for those. And that was her rhythm. That might not be a perfect rhythm for other people. Another engineer on her team, she then had conversations with all her direct reports. And one did not want to miss his Friday night football game with his university friends. For each person, their rhythm was a little bit different. But this is more of, I don't think there is such a thing as work-life balance in companies like that, but it is that proper work-life integration. When you find your particular rhythm, that's how you remain really enthusiastic, because your job is giving back to you as much as you're giving to it. And you have what you value most in your life, and you don't resent your job if you have a manager that's protecting that for you.
Work-life integration is really smart because there is no real work-life balance. I think that's a myth, right? And not really there. It's like, how do you integrate both, because they both exist in a healthy way, right? And we call it being productive and present. How do we remain productive and present at the right times with the right people in our lives, and make sure that we're all that the people that we're there for know that we're there for them. We're not distracted and pulled away at certain times. There's something called the 5 gears that I teach, and the gear 2 is the present gear, right? Like, I'm here with you. I'm not looking at my phone, right? We're having a conversation. So if I teach this to my kids, right? It's so easy. And so we'll be watching a movie. If I pick up my phone to check something, my daughter goes, Dad, she's 11. She's like, gear 2, Dad, gear 2. And I'm like, oh, got it. So, calling me up to be who I wanted to be. And I think that's super powerful. The other principle I got from what you just said is creating a culture of empowerment and opportunity. That right there is saying, I'm going to lead you the way you need to be led, not the way I think you need to be led, but the way you need to be led. And also you and you and you and you. And it takes a lot of effort, because it's not a one size fits all for everybody. So that's really powerful too, that I got out of you. And the one last thing that you said was brilliant is, I don't want to miss this. How many people can go to work right now and say, or come home from work right now and say, oh man, I can't wait to see what happens tomorrow. Like, I don't want to miss this. That is so interesting. I don't know how many people could say that right now.
I realize that is a privileged position that I have. Okay. Was every single day, did it feel like that? No, there were days I did expense reports and I did the non-sexy stuff. But in general, we were so purpose driven. We knew where we were going. And even though we were very much sprinting a marathon at the time, she helped us have these race tapes to break. She created these milestones that we could celebrate, and you didn't want to miss when the race tape finally got broken. It was just very exciting. And I think that's why I was so surprised. I never experienced burnout. I worked for 15 years without taking like a holiday or a weekend off or ever putting my phone down. Like I would literally take it in the shower with me, but I didn't burn out because I didn't want to miss it. I was so value aligned with what we were trying to do, that I felt like that. Again, not every single moment of every single day, but overall it made those boring, non-sexy expense reports like still have purpose behind it, I
Yeah,
guess.
right. It's like you don't mind doing the boring work because the other work is so purpose driven. I tell people that too.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't care if somebody's working on an assembly line putting arms on dolls for 8 hours a day. If they feel they're part of a bigger purpose and they feel excited about what's going to happen to this and they're part of a growth opportunity,
Yeah.
they're going to be excited, right, about that
Yeah.
thing. And so I think that that's really impactful. So let's move to Mr. Eric Schmidt then. What are the 3 words you'd use to describe Eric?
I mean, that's hard. I worked for him for 9.5 years. So by far my most experience with him. I would say he is curious, humble. Oh, it's so hard to only choose 3. Oh,
I usually let people
and
choose 5, but for the sake of the interview,
I like it. And complex. Eric has way more layers than most people would ever expect. That would be my last word. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, key takeaway from Eric, that you wanted to add to the book that you want everybody to feel inspired by or to know that they can do.
One of my favorite stories of Eric, and it is in the book, I share that he had this plaque on his desk at Google that said, "If at all possible, say yes." If at all possible, say yes is not about not delegating or saying yes to too many things or not being clear on your purpose or individual zone of genius. In fact, it's the opposite of that. If at all possible, say yes means lean into stuff that scares you a little bit. Say yes to going to a concert where you don't know that music. Say yes to going to something that being invited into a room that'll make you uncomfortable because you feel like the dumbest person in the table. He not only said yes to those things, he sought them out. Here's just one fun example. He realized Google was his 3rd company being CEO. He'd been CEO at Novell and Son before that. He realized as a professional CEO, most of his life was going to be living on an airplane. And so he decided if he was going to be living on an airplane, he wanted to do the fun part, which was fly it. So Eric became certified on 5+ jets, like he did as a hobby, what people do for a full-time living. And we would, when I was staffing him, when I was his chief of staff, we would go from a very intense negotiation. We would get to the plane. He would turn left, sit down and fly us. I would turn right and prepare the briefing documents for our next meeting. And then he would come back in because he liked to do the takeoff and the landings, which are the technical hard parts. And I just think that's obviously that's a funny, like little anecdote, but so the perfect little nutshell of how he leans into life. He wants to do the fun part, which is always the hardest, most challenging. It keeps him on his toes. It keeps his brain young and plastic. And that is why he's so complex, because he knows everything about everything, because he's curious and isn't afraid of doing things that might make him look dumb. Like, honestly, when you're Eric Schmidt and you're the CEO of Google and you went to Princeton, you have one of the first computer science engineering degrees, his PhDs from Berkeley, like everyone assumes you're always going to be the smartest person in the room. And he just rejects that. He seeks out rooms where he knows nothing about the expertise of the people around him and, leans into those conversations. And that makes him so multifaceted.
That's cool. Somebody told me yesterday, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Truth. And when you're Eric Schmidt, that's a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how do we apply that to us as entrepreneurs, as people going out with startup mentality, or we want to break out and do something? How do we apply that?
First, you have to get comfortable with the idea that contributing to a conversation and moving a project or a team or a company forward isn't arriving with all the answers. A lot of times, I did this, especially early in my career, when I had no idea what we were doing. In fact, in the beginning, I didn't even understand the vocabulary. There's all these acronyms in technology, and it's just this whole foreign language. And so a lot of times what I added to these tables or these rooms of geniuses was I would just learn the value of asking the right question. I helped the experts in the room to hone the data, to make sure that they had looked at it from different angles. Like for most of my career, I was the only woman in the room. So just the fact I just think differently. I perceive the world differently. I interact with it in a different way. So I had to realize that I could add the most value, not by being quiet and being a wallflower and being afraid of looking stupid in front of people whose opinions I really cared about. But often what I could really value is asking the right question. So as I progressed in my career, first it was, I did my homework. So at my desk on Amazon, I had this notebook. I wish I still had it today. Oh my gosh, I would love to see but I kept a list of all the people I didn't know, the terms I didn't understand. And I just did my homework every single day of just understand the context of what we're trying to do. And then I would go to my manager and be like, okay, make sure I had translated everything correctly. Then that gave me the confidence to start asking those questions in the room, even if maybe it revealed some of my novice lack of understanding. Then once that started going really well, I could proactively kind of poke holes in things or say like, "Ooh, but remember when we talked about this last month, you brought up this point. Maybe that applies here as well." And then you have the confidence to anticipate. And that's when my job got really fun. That's why I could be chief of staff at Google, was because I'd honed my instincts enough to be in rooms with like literally like Nobel Prize winning scientists and the greatest experts in the world, and anticipate where they needed to use their thought leadership next in ways that they hadn't yet seen. So that was kind of the progression. No matter where you're at in your career, you can always up level just a bit. But you got it. I guess the underlying lesson there is you do have to do your homework.
Okay. Valid. Yes, I would think so. I think that would be important. Well, good for you. I mean, did you ever feel afraid to speak up for fear of being feeling stupid or feeling intimidated? I mean, how did you transition into not being that way?
It's so hard. Honestly, my nature is very timid. I'm a perfectionist in all the negative connotations of that word. Like I self-inhibit and hold myself back out of fear of looking stupid or failing. Thankfully, the universe, that's my nature, the universe, and giving me this insane career I had not planned on, nurtured that out of me. And the truth is I just got worn down by it. That couldn't exist in these environments I found myself in. So it was sink or swim. It was like, jump into the deep end or get out of the pool. Those were the two choices. And so I was like, I didn't want to miss it. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to look stupid sometimes. But people often ask me, what is my biggest regret or what's the biggest mistake I ever made in my career? And I can assure you that list is long. Like when you're moving that fast and inventing things and doing things that not only I'd never done before, but no one had ever done before, you make a lot of mistakes. But the truth is the stuff that haunts me now is really at the heart of your question, which is the times I didn't raise my hand or I didn't volunteer to be on a project when I could have learned something or I could have contributed something amazing. And so it's more those times of omission than commission of that really I think about now, decades later. I don't honestly remember those sins of commission that like made me cry way back then. I don't even remember what they were, but the things I didn't volunteer for and didn't try, I do still think about those all the time.
Powerful. Cool. What about the, let's talk briefly, because it's so timely right now, about this great resignation that's happening. You're in Spain right now, and same experience in Spain that we're having here in the States with that?
Do you know, it's really interesting. Something magical is happening here in Spain or in Europe in general. So yes, there's a great resignation, which is a lot of people are leaving jobs that were honestly kind of crappy, that weren't valuing them as humans, that didn't take into account, families and balance and all those things. Yes, that's happening. But what I hear people talking about the most is the opportunities that this pandemic has given the economies here in particular. Because what used to happen pre-pandemic is all these ambitious, very talented, especially technologically attracted people, we had massive brain drain. People would leave Europe thinking the only way to have an impact was to go to the States. And because of the pandemic, they were forced to stay here. And then they found each other and they were like, well, while we're stuck here and we can't travel, let's get a jump start on this, or let's contribute in a different way, or let's do remote working for that company I got hired for, but can't go to yet. And it's created this incredible momentum around European grown talent. And I think that's in the best interest of the entire world. The more diversity we have in entrepreneurialism, in companies, in perspectives, in success, the better we're all going to be for that. So yes, there's the great resignation, but I think there's this special, incredible silver lining here in Europe, which also applies to the States. But I think it's accelerated them catching up to the States by 5, maybe 10 years.
That's fascinating. And yeah, as you think about the opportunities that came because of the pandemic, I mean, the pandemic was a giant forced experiment, right? On air pollution, looking at that when that's happened and they grounded all the planes and you're like,
that's crazy.
Wow, that was fascinating. Cause that would have never happened ever again. Right?
No.
Unless we had a global pandemic that shut down air travel. So you think about the opportunities that came out of this and the way you look at that, all the people that, came out of their jobs that were either laid off or quit because they realized that they didn't have to dwell in that space anymore, that said, you know what? I'm going to use your book title. I'm going to bet on myself, right? I'm going to use this time an opportunity, and I'm going to just put it out there, maybe some government stimulus money to help cushion me and help me feel a little bit more comfortable to do something that I wouldn't have normally done because of fear of not having healthcare or fear of not being able to do the thing that I wanted to do because so whatever it was, the pandemic created a lot of interesting opportunities. Are you seeing the same thing?
I definitely am. In fact, I just published, I'm very excited. My nerd self is very excited. I just published my very first article in Harvard Business Review about exactly that. And what I'm seeing is people recentering in purpose about what is it that they don't want to miss? What gets them out of bed that they are like, I know that this is a slog and this is hard and this is risky, but I don't want to miss this opportunity. And then second is the people. A lot of companies and entrepreneurs focus so much of their time thinking about the what and the how of their business plan and not enough time on the who. And in my experience in tech and in general, is the quality of people that you assemble around yourself is a much bigger indicator of future success and impact than the what or the how. And so having that high quality of people, and let's say you're not the founder of a company, so you can't necessarily be choosy about every single person you surround yourself with. I'm talking about even being thoughtful about like, whose influence are you watching on Instagram? Like, do they make you feel good and enthusiastic and proud of yourself? Or does it make you feel less than? Like really curate the people you have around yourself. And there's that saying that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most of our time with. So I think we should take that very, very seriously. If you can't choose your coworker or your boss, be choosy about who you hang out with in your community and online. The second part of that is this clarity around who you want to serve. There's a cause, there's a demographic, there's a moment out there that deserves your time, talent, and energy. So be very clear, make sure you've got the right team around you, and then be laser focused on who is that avatar person that you uniquely want to serve with this single precious life that we have. And when those things come into focus, that's when you get that enthusiasm of, oh my gosh, I don't want to miss this.
You're a rock star. That's awesome. I appreciate that. That's so good. And I know I've had that. I felt that in my journey into entrepreneurship and to what am I going to do? And there's so many doubts that come into your head and then so many triumphs, and it's a roller coaster for sure. And I know everybody says that, but the journey always is. And it's what do you glean from the good and the bad that helps make you who you are. And I want, that's why I always tell people, like, the bad stuff, embrace it, because that shaped who you are today. And that's shaping what you're doing at this very moment. And there's a lot of power in that, of self-worth and self-awareness that's really going to propel you forward. So super cool. Bet on Yourself. It's out now. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Everywhere you like to buy books. Yep.
I assume Amazon.
It is.
Yeah.
That was one of the greatest full circle moments of my life. The day it listed on Amazon.com, I thought, what would my 20-year-old self think sitting at that desk 19 years ago? What would you think? Yeah. So it's available there.
That's
And
awesome.
if you like audiobooks, if you consume stuff like this while you're on your morning walk or something, I myself read the book. So you can have me in your ear
Nice.
yet again.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Did you read it with like a Spanish accent or?
I had a COVID accent. Actually, I got
Oh,
COVID in the
okay.
middle of recording it. So
Oh
there's a couple
no.
chapters where you feel my voice go because I didn't know it at the time, but the next day I got a positive test. So yeah, that's a little behind the scenes.
Well, there you go.
FYI.
There you go. You will not get COVID though from listening to the
No,
book. So
no.
that's good to know. Okay. You are awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with all you're doing. And I appreciate you educating us today.
Thank you, Scott. This was super fun.